This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity Podcast and the Becker Business Minute. Today's discussion is 15 stories we're following this morning. First, the markets recovered last week. They're up last week, really based on perceptions that the Fed will pause another month or so in raising rates and may pause for the rest of the year. Second, the NASDAQ is back up to 29% year to date, being up 29% year to date. The S&P 500 up 13% year to date. Fourth, the markets point up significantly today, again, on interest rate sort of positivity that it's likely the Fed's not going to raise rates for a while. Finally, fifth, the world has all eyes on the Middle East to watch in part if Iran becomes more aggressive. I guess the learning lesson here in watching Iran, it's almost like watching Hitler in the 30s. You can't really mollify a terror state. And I think more and more Americans, at least, are coming to this conclusion that you can't get the peace in our time by trying to get close or do a business deal with Iran when essentially they live by a different set of rules and we live by and think differently. You really can't mollify terror states. Discussion in Bloomberg today, U.S. pushes to contain Israel-Hamas war, warns Iran about escalation. Also, a great Wall Street Journal article, Biden deterrence in Iran, which is somewhat critical of President Biden for not being strong enough in looking at these things as real threats. Sixth story we're following today, and that's a lot to digest what's going on in Iran, in the Middle East, and so forth. The sixth story is an Apple story. Apple's down Friday, it's pointing down pre-market today, but it's up 37.65% year to date. Its market cap has recovered to $2.8 trillion. It's, of course, the largest market cap company in the U.S. In the world. It had $95 billion in profits 2022. The bad news the last couple of days is that iPhone sales of the 15 are a little bit disappointing so far. Seventh, Walmart, which in contrast to Apple, Walmart's the largest company by revenues in the country. Apple's the largest company by market cap. Walmart has done this incredible job, probably of any company, of integrating technology into what was traditionally a bricks and mortar retailer. Just brilliant people. Its stock is up nearly 13% year to date. Eighth, a lot of great stories on the FTX Sam Bankman-Fried trial, SBF. They're trying to prove him guilty of sort of stealing money for all practical purposes, fraud, investor fraud. And there's this great question of the line between, was it malicious intent or were they just way over their skis and totally sort of negligent, gross negligence? And I guess, the great question is, at what point does someone who's so negligent with billions of dollars, does that become criminal? Or was he truly criminal? And people aren't really clear. But again, the prosecutors, they face a challenge in this trial that they don't have a big paper trail on Sam Bankman-Fried. So it's a really interesting situation. Is it truly fraud, or is it that he was just totally negligent in how he dealt with all the finances and money that he was raising so quickly and went up so quickly? Ninth, China's GDP growth is slowing to 4 to 5%. And then you really have to wonder, even with that, how much of that is real, because so much of it's built on a mountain of debt. Speaking of which, the U.S. also has to get its debt under control. 10th, and this is to mimic something we say all the time, but Jamie Dimon is saying as well, that as global debt worries mount, is another crisis brewing. This is a story today in Reuters. Again, we believe debt destroys countries, nations, families. You have to be so careful not to take on too much debt. Seems like a lot of the world is doing that. The 11th story found today, Lululemon, which at one point I seem to have worn a lot of, and I don't seem to be as hot on the Lululemon stuff as I was. It's just aging. It's so embarrassing. But they are now joining the S&P 500 index. Lulu is up 18% year to date. We'll see if that continues. 12th, Goldman's trying to get back to its basics of managing money for huge nations, high net worth families, others, and out of the consumer lending business, out of more traditional, mom and pop businesses, and back to trading, investment banking, and money management for huge net worth families and huge states and so forth, in placing debt and IPOs and all those kinds of things, and out of the consumer business. 13th, Rite Aid files for bankruptcy. The efforts to turn around Walgreens can't come fast enough in terms of another huge pharma chain that's really in the pharmacy chain business. 14, listen for updates at Becker Private Equity Podcast, the Becker's Healthcare Podcast. Thank you for listening. And finally, 15th, we are super thankful to Norman Thurston and Helen Figg. And the National Association of Health Data Organizations, they have an incredible meeting coming up in Boston. They had recently named me as the recipient of one of their Healthcare Executive of the Year awards. We're very thankful and undeserving, but we're thankful nevertheless. Thank you so much for listening to the Becker Private Equity Podcast. Thank you, as always, to our remarkable producer, Chanel Bunger. We are so thankful for your help and hope we didn't put you to sleep. Thank you so much for listening today.